Right when you drive off the ferry here in Bremerton, you'll pass by the Coffee Oasis, and the minute you step inside, you'll realize they are serving up so much more than just coffee.
Sit here. That was my bed.
Or in Lucas Flanagan's case, the only alternative to sleeping on the streets.
You can do your laundry in there. And
he gave us a look around the teen shelter that sits above the Coffee Oasis. Where would you be without the Coffee Oasis?
I'd probably still be homeless, and I'd probably be using drugs and not working.
1 out of 30 students in our Washington State schools are homeless. What's that?
Something Dave Frederick, the founder of the Coffee Oasis, saw for himself while riding the streets of Bremerton serving as a police chaplain.
Oh, good for you.
Dave and his wife Cindy took in many of the homeless teenagers he met, but wanted to do more.
This just love for kids that we just got to do something.
So 21 years ago, they brewed up a plan involving this rundown coffee shop that had become a hangout for troubled teenagers, including one who took his own life.
When we saw that the Coffee Oasis was for sale, I thought, wow, that this place that had experienced such tragedy could become a place of hope.
And it has.
20-ounce strip. All right, do you take room for cream?
The coffee sold here and 3 other locations on the Kitsap Peninsula supports the mission, propping up anyone from the age of 13 to 25 who may be struggling.
It's rebuilding that trust with a lot of patience and a lot of love and a lot of persistence.
A staff of 65 people providing crisis intervention, street and school outreach, therapy and mentoring.
So this is class 5.
Job training and internships.
Hey, Rachel.
Some of those who receive services like Maxine Evans end up working at the coffee shop.
I wouldn't know where I would be right now if I didn't have this place.
I actually have 4 felonies myself.
Many of those providing the support, like Lisa Henderson, who manages the street outreach team, have been there.
I remember being 13 years old, walking down the road and wishing that somebody who wasn't an abuser would actually pull over and ask me if I needed a ride.
An ability to relate.
And I was like, well, where am I gonna sleep?
That meant so much to Gage Foley.
It saved my life. It gave me hope.
The Coffee Oasis guided him out of a life of drugs, chaos, and homelessness into stability. He now owns and operates his own landscaping business.
I really owe much of my life to Coffee Oasis.
When do you move in?
I get my keys tomorrow.
Into his own place. Who for Lucas, now working full-time at Mod Pizza, seemed like a pipe dream just months ago. And confirmation for the man who believed coffee really could bring a community together.
A lot of emotion, a lot of appreciation, yeah. It's like, yeah, that's why we're here.
Other communities are reaching out to the Coffee Oasis saying, come here. And in September, they're opening up a new location in Kingston, Tacoma, Bainbridge Island, and Belfair next year. And it all started right here in Bremerton. Now back to you. His name is Bob Kilmer, and he's taking on a problem many of our elected leaders can't seem to solve: getting his students, teenagers, often called the selfie me first generation, engaged and invested in doing their part to get families off the streets and into housing. That's what the end of the school year sounds like at Enumclaw High School.
Pressure. You're good.
It's all part of a lesson.
And we're going to tack that in place.
Handed down by construction and architecture teacher Bob Kilmer.
There has to be things that are bigger than yourself.
That's the sort of wisdom that comes with 33 years of teaching.
This part wants to do that.
And the vision behind his big annual project for his students that this year required helping out with the homeless crisis.
Well, there is a need for people that need just a leg up, some transitional housing. And so I approached the kids with that idea and said, what if we provided that need? It was a little bit of a challenge to build. All right, as you walk in here, the first thing that you see is bench seating and storage here.
Like a proud father, he gives us a tour.
Big cabinet here.
Of the tiny home.
That's good.
Built almost entirely by his students, who at first weren't quite sure if they were actually up to it.
Really, we're going to build a house? No, we're going to design a house first, then we're going to build it.
All right, that's good.
They were all in.
They rose to the occasion. A welding class provided the trailer the home's built on. Students reached out to a local construction company, which donated most of the materials.
That's what we want in every aspect of our life and every aspect of our world, right? The more people doing good, the better off we are.
I think that's one of the nicest things about this is actually just looking out there and seeing your progress. You know, like you can really see what you have accomplished.
Senior Will Snyder and his classmates.
This will kind of be our kitchen area here.
Collaborated with other kids from Interlake High School in Bellevue, who provided the solar panels and wiring for the home.
Adults sometimes underestimate the power of teenagers, and it's nice to show that when we come together as a whole, we can make a difference in the world.
Just one of many lessons learned along the way.
Because it's all about the lasting effect and like creating a better environment for these people.
My work is actually going towards something other than just my grade. You know, it's actually going somewhere out there in the community for everyone.
It's got Will's name on it. It's got every kid in this classroom's name on it. And so is that something that you're going to be proud of? I want kids to take that away.
Mr. Kilmer is an amazing teacher.
It's not just his students who recognize it. Here's the moment when Harbor Freight Tools awarded Kilmer and Enumclaw High a $100,000 prize for teaching excellence, confirmation of the impact he's having on these kids.
Those are the people that made a difference in my life. You know, quality teachers that cared, so.
A lifetime of commitment to students.
Hold it until it gets started.
Now building a foundation for the future.
Kids and adults working together, you know, to provide a leg up in a small community, what could be better?
And so we honor Bob Kilmer as a true change maker in our community. This is part of a bigger movement. Just last week, 400 workers from Paul Allen's company Vulcan helped build tiny homes. If you'd like to be a part of the solution and help build, we've set up a link on our website. That's q13fox.com. Now back to you.
The controversy over protests during the national anthem at NFL games is dividing us more now than ever before, especially after President Donald Trump this week disinvited the Super Bowl winning Philadelphia Eagles to the White House, instead deciding to have a celebration of patriotism. But of course, each of us defines patriotism in a different way. Some believe the protests are uniquely American, while others say they are a slap in the face to America's most treasured symbol, the flag. On one side, Trevor Smith.
I'm a locomotive engineer for the railroad.
The 31-year-old from Warding, Washington, also served in the military. Can you tell me a little bit about your military service?
So military, I was a reservist in the Navy. I was a Seabee. We were stationed down in Gulfport, Mississippi. Spent 6 years in the reserves, one tour of duty of 12 months in Afghanistan.
On the other side, 36-year-old Jesse Simmons.
Currently, I live in Lacey, Washington, and I am a campaign manager and run political campaigns.
Like Trevor, he served in the armed forces.
I did almost 8 years in the Army. Fort Lewis was my first duty station.
Besides their service, both men have another thing in common. I'm assuming you're both Seahawks fans.
Through and through.
You used to be a Cowboys fan. Is that
So
the situation?
I grew up in Texas. The Cowboys is where my original loyalties lie, but Seahawks are growing on me. So.
And is one of you a season ticket holder?
We are. My family is my in-laws.
Yeah. Congratulations.
Right.
But despite being fellow veterans and Seahawks fans, the two feel much differently about the protests at the center of national debate. Protests started by former 49ers quarterback Colin Kaepernick, who wanted to make a statement about inequality against people of color.
Coming from a military family, a military service member, I was outraged. You know, I didn't think it was fair for him to do it, to use his position in the NFL community to do that. I fought for it, that flag, as well as my brothers and sisters have fought for that flag. The first time when I saw it, I was completely outraged, and I didn't really understand why he was doing it.
Jesse actually started out feeling the same way until he learned more about what the protests were over.
A certain segment of society feels like the justice system doesn't treat them with enough respect or treat them the same as others. I don't see it as disrespect. It's more of like they're tired of the way they're being treated. You know, and what do you do when you're tired? You take a knee. I think we also have to try not to shift the focus to the flag and try to keep it on, you know, what are the concerns of that segment of society. I think they feel like they've been left behind. You know, there's so many obstacles that they have to face, and I think we may not, you know, as a white person in America, I've never experienced half the things that black folks have in America, and I could never truly understand it, but I can try to be empathetic to it.
While both men seem to agree that the players have a right to protest, they disagree on whether the consequences for those actions are fair.
I don't think you should be fined for expressing your freedoms, your rights in this country.
There's consequences for everything. They're not forced to stay there. They're not forced to play a game.
Despite both having served in the military, it was clear Jesse and Trevor had very different perspectives on the issue, and neither was likely to change. But they did find common ground on one thing, this statement made by the president.
You have to stand proudly for the national anthem. Well, you shouldn't be playing, you shouldn't be there. Maybe you shouldn't be in the country.
Absolutely not the right thing to say. I think that goes back to the basic concepts in our Constitution, the idea of America, that we're a melting pot. We all have different opinions, different backgrounds.
100% in agreement with that. Everybody does have the right to be here. For him to say that, it really shows his some sort of ignorance that he has. I mean, it's our First Amendment. We do have the right to speech. Whatever that speech may be, kneeling, standing, jumping jacks, it doesn't matter. We do have that right. For the president to come out and say, you know, if you are going to kneel or disrespect a flag that he never fought for, to say, then get out. I'm sure Jesse and I would, you know, say to the president that we didn't fight for the flag for that reason.
Did we find something we agree on, gentlemen?
I think so, a little bit. He's still a Cowboys fan, though.
The two could also agree on something else, although it's not about the NFL protests per se. We found them for this segment because both were part of debates online on our Q13 Facebook page. Debates, they agree, can get nasty.
It ain't pretty.
No.
No. It's not.
Keyboard warriors.
Keyboard warriors. What would you say to your fellow Americans about being able to sit and talk about something like this like adults?
So that's how you grow as a person. Anybody can sit behind a computer. You have no idea who you're talking to on the other side of that computer. You have no idea where he came from.
I would agree. I think that social media has taken the personal aspect out of it, and they don't see that person typing on the other side as a person, maybe, and maybe we've forgotten that. We should be more empathetic. Stop waiting to type or waiting to talk, and maybe, you know, listen and see what the other side has to say.
Your guys' conversation and your conversation in the green room, does it open your eyes to, you know, putting a face to the other side of things?
I think we walked into the lobby, and I told the receptionist I was here for Bridging the Divide, and he turned around, and I was like, oh man, we started talking. I was like, man, I like you already. You know, how can we be so polar opposites? But yeah, I like him right there, because you never know, is his comment could be completely opposite of mine, but here two people are in a lobby, strangers, and that come out, you know, friends that, you know, have respect for one another.
Even those who have served our country disagree over whether protests during the national anthem are appropriate. That should show you just how controversial the topic is. But having that debate online will never beat having a conversation about it in real life. Because even though you can't fully understand someone's perspective unless you've walked in their shoes, you will never understand it while sitting behind a keyboard. There's been a lot of anger in Seattle this past week over the homeless crisis. Every aspect of the debate seems to pit people against one another. Now, I'm not proud of it, but I've been part of that as well. In particular, after I sent out what I thought was a pretty innocuous tweet on Monday. It was gorgeous outside, and I had gone for a walk a few hours before the City Council was set to vote on that controversial new tax to pay for affordable housing. As I was walking down the sidewalk along Lake Union, it just struck me that no one acknowledged each other. I said a quick hello in passing to 3 different people, and all of them just ignored me completely. Said nothing back, no smile, nothing. And I'll admit, it bothered me. I sent out a tweet saying, maybe while we're waxing poetic today about helping our fellow humans in need, we can start by just saying hi to each other. Some people took issue with that, saying they aren't obligated to say hi to strangers and that saying hi won't fix the homeless crisis. Well, that might be true, but it seemed so odd to me. Here we were as a city that day, locked in a heated argument over how to help those in need. And I just wondered how much more empathy there would be in the debate over homelessness if more of us would take the time to get to know one of their stories, or to just say hi instead of ignoring them as we walk by. A couple years ago, I met with a group of high school students out at a leadership camp. I spoke to them about empathy. As a lesson, I told them stories about homeless people who I've met. People like Jordan, who I met a couple years ago while he was living on the streets of Seattle. He told me his mom kicked him out of the house when he was just 14 years old. He had been on his own ever since. It was hard not to have empathy for Jordan once I heard his story. I also showed the students a picture of John, who lives all alone in a rundown motel room using money from a small Social Security check. He used to have a family, a beautiful family, a wife and kids and a house, but he just could not get past his addiction to alcohol. His 4 kids are now adults and have had very little contact with their dad for the past 10 years. And it's sad because his health is getting pretty bad, and I really don't know how much longer he'll be around to try to reconnect with his kids. You may be wondering how I know so much about him. Well, I happen to be one of John's 4 kids. This is the last picture that I took with him. We have thousands of people who are homeless in our communities. They are not nameless or faceless. They each have a unique story and a unique set of circumstances that landed them where they are. As the debate over all of this continues, maybe we can take a moment out of our busy lives to get to know someone who is struggling, to empathize with them. It might mean you have to start the conversation by actually saying hello. But if we truly care about those in need, maybe saying hi isn't too much to ask. As for me, I think I have a call to make to my dad that is very long overdue.
Democrats say the president's pivot comes way too late, while some Republicans say they are taking him at his word that he simply misspoke.
All right, so let's check in with Brandy. She is here to talk more about the fallout from that summit and what it could mean for all of us.
Yeah, good morning. One of the big questions is whether President Trump's performance alongside Putin could further embolden Russia to continue its efforts to influence our elections. Naveed Jamali is the author of the book, How to Catch a Russian Spy. For 3 years, he worked undercover for the FBI to gather information on Russian military intelligence agents operating in New York. He joins us now in studio. You have a fascinating story. I want to talk about it a little later, and the book as well. A good time to read a book about Russian spies if you're so inclined. As someone who risked his life for our country to try to counter Russian intelligence, what did you make of the president's remarks at the summit?
I was very disturbed by them. Look, what I learned about Russia is that everything for them is about leverage. That's the first thing. The second thing is that while the Cold War has ended for the United States, Russia has not been so inclined to change their position, their ideology. They still view the United States as their primary adversary. So whatever you think about partisanship, whatever you're a Republican or a Democrat, it's important to understand that the threat that Russia poses to this country has not abated.
When you heard, the president came out this morning and said he meant wouldn't when he said would, something that I said is there were a lot of other remarks the president made. It wasn't just this one sentence that people took issue with. That was perhaps the most clear one. But given the totality of his remarks, what message do you think that sends to Putin and to Russia when it comes to their ability to continue doing what we know that they've been doing?
Yeah, that's exactly right, Brandy, is that they're going to continue doing what we know they've been doing. Look, when it comes to Russia, the only thing that they understand is strength. And frankly, the minute the president picked up the phone and asked for a meeting with Putin, he was making the first concession. As far as I can tell, the Russians made no concession in return. And that's really the game that's played here. So when you are deferring to the Russians, when you are showing any sign of weakness, you are giving them the higher ground, and that's a huge problem. So besides what he said, just the fact that he took the summit without getting any concession, I think, is frankly a major failure for U.S. diplomacy.
Do you think it helps at all that the president came out in D.C. and said, this is what I really meant, I misspoke? Any help there?
No, I don't think so. Just from the Russian standpoint, no. The Russians understood when he took that meeting, they walked away with this as a victory. So what he might have done might have assuaged and calmed some of the fears domestically. It doesn't change what the Russians thought of the outcome.
It seems as if there's been, more so than other issues that have been brought up with the president, other incidences that we've had that have made the news, if you will, there was backlash from Republicans. There were some Republicans, albeit ones that have already criticized the president, but who came out in very, very harsh terms about what happened at that summit. Do you see this as something that should be and is above party lines? Absolutely.
We're talking about national security. I mean, national security should not be a partisan thing. I think that when you look at Republicans and Democrats, there should be no daylight between them. And I'm frankly very disturbed that this has become a partisan issue both by the Democrats and the Republicans. At the end of the day, while I don't think this was a Pearl Harbor style attack, nonetheless, it was a significant operation that was, I think, successful by the Russians. And the fact that we're not treating it as a failure, as something that we need to address, that we need to look at from a security standpoint, I mean, to me, that's disturbing. It's become mired in politics.
What do you say to the average American who is wondering, you know, they see it as, some of them, a political issue. If you're on the right, you might see it as just attacks against the president. I think the president called it Trump outrage syndrome or something like that. But for the average American, how do you convince them that this matters and the way with which our president approaches Russia, speaks to Putin matters?
Look, we're all Americans, whether we're Seattleite or Washingtonian or we live in Washington, D.C. The reality is that this is an American issue. It's a national security issue. Russia doesn't care who's in the White House, whether it's a Republican or a Democrat. Their view of the United States being their primary adversary has stayed consistent since the close of the Cold War. And as long as we make this a partisan issue, we're letting Russia simply win. It's as simple as that to me.
Quickly before I ask about the book, any doubt that they're going to try again the next presidential election?
I don't think they've ever stopped trying. I mean, the focus that they might do the exact same thing, I think, is not necessarily right. But it comes down to, for me, the ideology, which is the Russians view the United States as their primary enemy. And as long as they hold that ideology, because Putin remains in power, they're going to continue to look to attack and destabilize us. I mean, why wouldn't they stop?
So for people who are watching all this, they want a good read on the topic. Give us your pitch for your book, How to Catch a Russian Spy. I've heard it's funny. I ordered a copy this morning because you were coming on. And I was like, how is it funny? It's about Russian spying. So give us the pitch. Why should we read it?
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. The Russians met with me. One of their favorite places to take me, I don't know if this says something about me or them, was Hooters.
Maybe about them.
Yeah, right. So there's a lot of, if you're not doing espionage and laughing, you're doing it wrong. I mean, there's a lot of moments that were legitimately funny, and I dealt with fear by looking at it with humor. It was named the funniest book by the Washington Post, and you know, it is a funny moment, but you know, it is obviously a very serious topic.
Very serious, and a glimpse into Russian intelligence at a time when that's very, very notable. Naveed, we appreciate your time and for being here this morning.
So when somebody is new in your life, you know, like a kid, you might be excited. It's a super exciting time. As a parent, it's also overwhelming, and you probably need a little bit of help, but you don't really have the time or the bandwidth to ask for help. So guess what? If you have a new or expectant parent in your life, I have two folks here who are going to help you support those folks. They're parenting experts, Kira Dorian and Dina Thayer. They're from allthingsbirthandbaby.com. You have some really simple and practical ways to support parents and new parents in our lives. So how can we make sure that like basic needs are met? That seems like most important to me.
Yeah, and I think that it's really about, first and foremost, the couple need to get clear on which of the basic needs are going to be hardest for them to give up. Because everyone's different. Some people don't care if they miss a shower, and some people really care. And so if they have a sense of what they really need, you can then bring friends and family into the fold and say, hey, when you come over, can you ask me if I've had a shower? Because if I haven't had one, then I want you to hold my baby so I can take a shower, right? And if friends and family kind of know what what those basic needs are, they can be a part of supporting them being met.
That's a great idea. So the couple can do a little bit of work beforehand, and then friends can say, here's how I can help.
And they can support each other, right? If my partner knows I need a shower every day, they can get up early to help me get one. If we haven't communicated about that, then they don't know that I'm missing something I need.
And what about checking in? So this is something that, like, when we had kids, we had an onslaught of people initially, and then we didn't have a lot of people who checked in on us. It seems like there could be a better way to do this.
Yeah, I think it's one of the biggest mistakes that friends and family make is they're excited when you bring a new baby home, and then they go back to their lives, and the parents don't go back to their lives. Their lives are like upside down. So one of the best things that really they can do is to continue checking in beyond those first couple weeks. And I like check-in questions that are specific. You know, saying, how are you, is probably gonna get you up fine.
Right.
Yeah. So something specific, how's breastfeeding going today? Or, you know, what kind of day are you having? Is today better than yesterday? How was sleep last night? So you get more specific answers that you can then maybe help based on what you're hearing.
Let's talk about sleep then, putting together a sleep plan. How can people help with that?
Oh, absolutely, and we definitely recommend talk about that in advance too. Don't wait until you're bleary-eyed and exhausted. So there's a couple ways we can do that. Parents who are pumping, maybe breastfeeding but pumping, or using formula, you can even just divide the night in half. Maybe one parent will take 9 p.m. to 3 a.m., the other one's 3 to 9 a.m. You each get a nice chunk of sleep. But if you've got a breastfeeding mom, for example, maybe you divide the chore. She gets up and feeds, but then dad swoops in and does the diaper change and soothing back to sleep, so they can both get some needed shut-eye during those first bleary-eyed days.
Such great advice. Thank you both for being here. We really appreciate it. So more information on your website, allthingsbirthandbaby.com. You connect all sorts of great resources, vetted, local.
Right.
So check it out if you have a family who might be expecting in your community. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
The 100 deadliest days starts when kids are out of school for the summer. Take a look at this graph from 1999 to 2016. The number of car accidents goes up in June and spikes in July and August. Many of those accidents involving teens.
Carrie Staley welcomes distractions.
You can't help it.
Anything to shut off her surges of grief.
This will happen, and then I'll be gone in a couple minutes.
Carrie says the tears just happen, but how can it not?
This was his last picture.
The bright smile is the way she remembers her son Landon, not the way he died.
Because he never did sneak out at my house. You know, I kept a tight rein on where they were.
But the one time Landon snuck out of their Mill Creek home with 3 other teens, this is how it ended.
I know he didn't suffer. I know it was instantaneous.
The group went to Seattle, and on the way back, Landon crashed into a parked semi-trailer on the side of the road in Linwood. Out of the 4 teens inside, only 1 girl survived.
I find it comforting that at least she lived. I don't know her. I don't even know that my son really knew her.
Carrie says she thinks about the other teens who died and their families every day. Crash investigators can't say for sure why Landon drifted off the road. Was he distracted? Was it speed? Did he fall asleep? Toxicology reports later revealed that the 16-year-old had marijuana in his system.
Well, of course, every parent will blame himself.
But this mom says her son wasn't a troubled kid. He was a typical teen last July, experimenting and excited over the freedom that comes with a new driver's license.
His mind was in the right spot, but he made a bad choice that night.
She says she talked to Landon about drugs and driving safety all the time.
And I had a talk with him about my concerns because he had already driven with extra kids in the car.
With summer approaching once again, she wants all parents to be vigilant and teens to listen.
We're putting these rules and these boundaries up to protect you guys.
Crashes significantly increase for teenage drivers in the summer. It's known as the 100 deadliest days.
I wish there was commercials on TV that talked about the safety in driving.
And also the pain that comes with enormous loss.
I wanted them firsthand to see raw, watching me go through some of the pain and some of the things I've been through, and maybe think twice about their choices.
Carrie's choice is to push on for Landon's younger brother, who in a couple of years will start driving.
The traffic alone and the population alone is so much more than it was, and it's scarier.
The family is always reminded of what can happen.
And all of us wear Landon around our neck. This is Landon's thumbprint and initials, and in the center is his ashes.
Took the supermarket flash from the windowsill.
She also made this video of the 16 years Landon had in this world.
Packed up the photo album Matthew had made. Memories of a life that's been loved.
It's comforting and tough at the same time.
One of her very favorite moments is this one between Landon and his dad.
When I fell down, you'd be there holding me up.
We didn't get a chance to interview Landon's dad because he died from cancer less than 2 years ago.
I love this picture of the two of them together.
Her husband and her son gone from her life.
And I know they're together, I just know.
At least they are now mingled.
Forever in our hearts. And I love it. Oh, yeah. We'll see each other again.
In Snohomish County, Hannah Kim, Q13 News.
Driving under the influence.
You were driving over this white line for quite a bit.
Swerving, speeding, crashing. More than half of drivers killed in the U.S. are impaired. And 3 years ago, drugged drivers killed on the road eclipsed those with just alcohol in their system. That same year, King County Deputy Stephen Minters joined the force.
One thing I'm seeing,
And he says even more people are now driving high.
from what I've seen, yes, it's increased.
We're along for the ride on a DUI emphasis patrol.
We've got a possible accident that might be related to what we're doing tonight.
Where drunk driving is easy to diagnose.
This here is a preliminary breath test. It's voluntary. It doesn't take the place of the front.
X-ray 12, 1 in custody, DUI. We're going to go to the precinct for additional tests, okay?
A quick exhale can tell an officer how much alcohol is in a person's system. But drugs require more discernment. That's where drug recognition experts, or DREs, come in.
Every officer has the ability to recognize impairment. They do. We just come in and help document it.
Sergeant Mark Crandall is Washington State Patrol's DRE coordinator, overseeing 200 officers that specialize in impaired driving. With drug use, toxicology is the final piece of a 12-step evaluation process. The symptoms need to speak for themselves.
Anytime there's an arrest, everybody hears from the back of their mind, prove it. So we have to prove it, and proving it in a court of law is beyond a reasonable doubt.
According to AAA, deadly crashes involving marijuana doubled in Washington after legalization. Where experts and officers are clear, drugs impair driving. Public opinion still lags. According to a 2018 report by Washington Traffic Safety Commission, only about a third of drivers who've used marijuana in the past year believe it impairs their ability to drive within 2 hours of use. The results are even more shocking when it comes to the youngest drivers on the road. More than half of drivers aged 15 to 20 believe using marijuana made them better drivers.
That's concerning.
In the most recent Washington State Healthy Youth Survey, 1 in 4 12th graders reported using marijuana in the past month, and half of those users said they drove within 3 hours.
It's the high-risk behavior that scares me the most on kids.
For Sergeant Crandall, it's up to parents to mitigate that risk by telling their kids beforehand they can call on them for a ride.
You can talk to the kid later about disappointments. You can talk to them about why are you at the party or with somebody. But ultimately, most of us parents were like, please, we'll go pick up kids. We would all wake up in the middle of the night and go get friends' kids. We would do anything that we could.
Anything to get them home in one piece. A DUI emphasis patrol starts out way before officers get on the road. It begins with outreach and education, so that by the time enforcement happens, hopefully no one is driving impaired.
Your brake light's out. Just get it fixed, okay? I'm going to give you a warning on it. Thank you for not being impaired.
In King County, Simone Del Rosario, Q13 News.
You know, with a never-ending string of data breaches, now is a good time to remind you to create a strong, unique password to protect your personal information. A survey done earlier this year by software company LogMeIn shows that 91% of people know that using the same password for several accounts is a bad idea. but nearly 60% of us do it anyway. In fact, experts say if it's easy for you to remember, it's easy for the bad guys to figure out. Consumer Reports saying ideally a password should be made up of a long string of at least a dozen seemingly random uppercase and lowercase letters, and maybe try an easy to remember phrase and then throw in some special characters. Now here's an example. How about this? I love dogs and cats, but change the O's to zeros, maybe use an ampersand there for the word and an exclamation point at the end. And there you go. It's a pretty hard to crack password there. Consumer Reports also suggesting never include your name, birthday, references to personal details, no kids details. Hackers can easily find that information on Facebook and Twitter, social media. They can find those clues. Also, make sure you do not use the same password for every account. It is hard to remember several complicated passwords, so Consumer Reports says use a password manager that'll store and keep track of all your passwords in one place. Consumer Reports recommending services like 1Password, LastPass, and Dashlane. 1Password costs $3 a month across all your devices. LastPass and Dashlane are free, but Dashlane will actually cost you about $40 a year to sync one account across all of your devices. Also, try multi-factor authentication when available. That could be maybe a code texted to your phone that you have to type in, or something like asking for your thumbprint to log in. So even if hackers have your password, it's going to be harder to access your account. Finally here, embrace change. If a company announces that they've been hacked, change your password right away, even if your account was not directly affected. And also clean out your digital footprint. If you have an email address or a social media account that you don't use anymore, close them so you don't have to worry about getting hacked. Saving money may be simple, but actually keeping it, we know that can be pretty tough. You know, maybe you cut expenses in one area and then you spend it somewhere else. So we gathered some tips to trick yourself into saving money that actually work. First off, finance website NerdWallet says automate it. Set up automatic transfers to a savings account or retirement fund so it doesn't feel like you're cutting into your paycheck. If you don't have to think about how much you're putting away, you're less likely to miss that money. Also, how about naming it? NerdWallet says labeling an account with its purpose can actually help you from using your money for other things. Maybe you name it vacation or property taxes or new car fund, you know, stuff like that. NerdWallet says it's a lot harder to dip into a savings account that says dream trip to Bora Bora than a nameless account because it really makes you think about what you are sacrificing. Also, NerdWallet has another tip here. It says you can also try using an app, and there are a ton. The app Digit analyzes your checking account transactions and then transfers money that it doesn't expect you to spend on bills or rent into a Digit savings account. The app Acorns tracks your transactions and rounds up on each purchase, and then the difference, just a few cents even, is transferred into an Acorns savings account. Or you could try locking it up. NerdWallet says consider a certificate of deposit. That is money you can leave in the bank for a set amount of time, and you will pay a penalty if you take it out before that time is up. And finally here, save your raise. NerdWallet suggests putting that extra money that you will earn from a raise into your 401k or savings account. You won't feel like you're cutting into your paycheck because you really won't have to change your spending habits each month.
Because when we fight, we win!
There's a new movement in Seattle.
The citizens of the city have created a movement of their own.
Many demanding accountability for all the money used on homelessness.
$200 million in tax dollars were spent on homelessness in King County last year. That's 17,000 for every homeless man, woman, and child, and the problem got worse. I beg you, take a step back.
That was Matt Dubin right before 9 city council members unanimously approved a controversial head tax on large companies to build affordable units. We sat down with Dubin again today.
We spend more per capita on homelessness than almost any large city in the country, and yet we're the third worst.
Dubin is so riled up about the crisis, he's running to be a state lawmaker.
I think there's a lot of stubborn pride.
I'm sorry, there needs to be an audit like right now.
North Seattle resident Jennifer Espeland is talking about the $50 million in homeless funding for 2017. She wants City Council to account for every penny spent.
Put a link on your page that the public can hit that shows Where has the money gone?
A city council spokesperson says those dollars are tracked by the mayor's office, broken up by different departments. So let's start here at the Department of Human Services. They do have a pie graph up, somewhat explaining the $50 million for 2017. 34% went to permanent housing support. 50% got eaten up in the emergency category, things like hygiene centers, authorized encampments, and emergency shelters. But this pie graph is not the definition of accountability for Aspelant, and many now are demanding for transparency.
There's a lot of people with their hands out, and you don't have any performance results to show for it. No, that's when you stop. You stop giving the money away. You got to be held accountable.
And when we talk about the new lump of money, another $50 million generated from big businesses, council yesterday grabbed the money with a non-binding agreement on how to spend it.
It's not a to the penny how the money is going to be spent document. Those are the conversations that we're going to be having once we receive a proposed implementation.
Council vows to use 2/3 of the funds to build affordable housing over the next 5 years. And the mayor promised this.
The people of Seattle have my pledge as their mayor. I am going to work as hard as I can to make sure that every penny is spent wisely and efficiently and makes a difference.
The campers on 5th and 58th, 20 feet away from Green Lake homes, are gone.
It's a mess.
Piles of trash left behind. The campers once here now tenting in a new location just 8 blocks away.
They're not as close to other houses, and in fact, a lot of them are just right up against I-5.
Neighbors say not all the campers were committing crimes, but many were. Kristen Frosaker says residents had to deal with property crime, theft, open drug use, and defecation on their yards.
We're not going to shut up because we're not safe. And when our children can't walk down the street to a park, or I can't go to my car.
Frosaker says she and many others for the past 2 months wrote to city leaders, specifically council member Michael Bryan, who represents this neighborhood.
I've sent emails and had no response. I don't have a direct dial to him. I wish I did.
You email this heartfelt, passionate message to your representative, and you hear you get a response that it's like a canned response.
Betsy Pito says about a week after emailing Mike O'Brien, she did receive a response from his intern. Our office read all the emails expressing frustration, it reads. The response also said O'Brien did encourage the mayor's office to address the encampment, but that at the time, it did not rise to the need of a removal.
I voted for the man because he favors rights for the homeless, as do I.
Pito says she and her neighbors feel ignored.
We're seen as expendable. That makes me very angry.
We are losing our city. We cannot have anarchy and lawlessness here.
We have directly emailed Mike O'Brien and also repeatedly requested an interview through his spokesperson. The first request last Thursday and then today, but he did not make himself available for an on-camera interview.
It's personal now. It's not just driving by and ignoring the mess. This is damaging my family.
Kristen says she no longer can stay silent and wants accountability from the city.
I want them to cease allowing camping. It shouldn't happen. If I need to move to Edmonds to stop having to live near campers who are taking advantage of innocent people, I guess I will, even though I love Seattle.
Welcome back. 6:53. I know it's that time of year. It's summer. It's bound to happen.
Yeah.
But there's a spider in our studio right now, and I cannot handle it.
I promise I'll get it out after this.
Thank
hit.
you.
Yes.
Like, what would I do without you? I'm having a meltdown. Ooh, Adam Gerke's on the case.
Oh, look. Yeah, Adam's gonna do it.
Oh, just get it out of here.
It's a live play-by-play of Adam.
I know.
Rescuing the spider over here.
And I know, it's that time of year. But anyway, so let's talk about glass. I mean, it's been around for centuries, but we're about to get a look at a new kind of glass that apparently does some remarkable things. Glass on your phone.
Yeah, exactly. It's Gorilla Glass. So Corning is the glass maker. They're a very famous company. And specifically, they make this Gorilla Glass, which is used by Apple, Samsung, high-end phone makers. And this week, the company actually introducing the 6th generation of its Gorilla Glass. And here's what Mashable's saying about it this morning. Glass phones are about to get really, really cool. So take a look at this. This is the new glass. It can actually be etched to mimic textures like wood, rock, marble, or here's an example of snakeskin. Apparently it's so realistic you have no idea it even is glass. It also means that it's not going to look or feel like you normally think it should, and then there's its strength. This is some video that Corning provided earlier this week. It basically says that it is so tough because of what's inside here, it can survive on an average of 15 times of being dropped on a rough surface before it shows any signs of anything happening to it. So this is the future, potentially, of glass. And what we're talking about here is you walking into a phone store and saying, you know, instead of picking a phone and then picking a case that you want to decorate it with, you could pick the color, the texture, whether you want it to be translucent or not, and all of that making it a glass phone that you can still drop.
Okay, so the dropping part, that's super important. I don't know about you, I'm constantly dropping my phone. But if it doesn't look like glass and it doesn't feel like glass and you don't think it's glass, why does it need to be glass?
Yeah, because of the swiping. Basically, the whole point of it is the touchscreen nature. That's what our smartphones do today. So glass is the best interactive feature for doing that. And so they want to continue expanding technology. We like it, you like it. That's what phone makers are going to continue doing, so it has to be glass. And so they want to make it as durable, but also as variety so that you can express your own, you know,
Your
likes
personal,
exactly, with your phone, and not just cover it in a case.
Sure, personalizing it more.
Exactly, making it big and bulky.
Exactly, because why buy a beautiful phone and then you got to cover it in a big old case? Travis, thanks.
Thanks.
Would you believe me if I told you that Seattle has more than 2 parking spaces for every single person living in the city? No, of course you wouldn't, right? Well, Travis, it is apparently true, and we're getting even more.
Apparently, as we build more and more buildings and there are more parking garages and parking lots, Seattle at this moment, though, has 1.6 million publicly available parking spots as of like today. That's parking garages, parking lots, street parking all combined. These folks say they counted them up. They're the folks at the Mortgage Bankers Association, and they say this is the first time anybody has really quantified the number of parking spots in cities, which leads us to this headline in the Seattle Times. Study shows Seattle has plenty of parking, so why can't you find a spot? The answer is, according to the Times, that you aren't looking hard enough, or you don't want to pay for it. You have apparently thousands of choices of spots in garages and pay lots, and that's where you need to look more often, apparently. We don't have as much street parking as other cities maybe, but we have way more garage parking and parking lot parking. Now, I will point this out as well. This doesn't count private driveways, private garages, lots like at grocery stores or malls. These are basically, anybody can get them spots. So that 1.6 million number is actually pretty small in comparison to the actual number of parking spots available to all of us.
And I will do 4 laps looking for street parking before I actually give in and do the parking garage thing. I don't know about you.
Yeah, to quote the brilliant classic 90s movie Clueless, I will do a lap before committing to a location.
There you go. That's exactly right. All right, Travis, thank you.